Landscape architect Kendra Baumgardner is managing principal of the SWA Group's Houston studio. Scott McCready is a principal in the SWA Group. Together, they will discuss the work their firm has done at Buffalo Bayou Park.
Okay, so when Charles asked me to come and talk about Buffalo Bayou Park, those of you who know me well know that I decided not to do that, talk about something completely different. Sorry, Charles. Scott will talk about Buffalo Bayou, though. This is going to be my love letter to Houston, and I'm just going to set the tone for how Buffalo Bayou works and why that project is possible here. So, made in Houston. So, Houston loves infrastructure, right? We make self-congratulatory cards to ourselves on infrastructure, right? Every morning, if you drive to downtown Houston, this is a bridge, it says, be someone, right? You're struck with infrastructure right in the face on your way to work, but it's also telling you, be someone, right? Go to work today and do something awesome. And I think that's this interesting relationship that Houstonians have to infrastructure. And that kind of relationship is a thing that has made Buffalo Bayou Park actually possible. So, this is a picture of Houston's skyline, and that kind of gray thing in the front, actually that's the Be Somebody, Be Someone bridge. Those of you who know Houston well, there's a few of us here, know that that is Houston in the 1980s. And you can tell because there's no cars on the roadway, right? It's empty. This is probably about 1987, okay? And so in 1980, Houston was having a party, right? We were all going to Gillies. If you didn't have a mechanical bull in your bar, you didn't have a bar. So, and this is in Pasadena, not very far from here. We made a movie about Houston, right? Urban Cowboy, big deal. You all had to wear those pants, those hats, all across the country. And then these guys were here in the 1980s, right? So we had, well, do I have to name them? You know, Johnson, Pay, Pelly, right? And they got really busy, and we were leading with architecture, as we already know. And then 1986 came along, and suddenly all that sort of stuff went on hold, right? They got here just in time to get some cool stuff done, and then they kind of left. And they came back, what, maybe 15 years later, something like that, I guess, yeah. So fast forward to today, right? Who we have? Thomas, Michael, Adrian. I don't know, guys. Oil prices are about as low as they were in 1986. Anyway, I hope not. We'll see. So anyway, this little town that grew up on Buffalo Bayou, that's the ship channel, actually, today. And this was the ship channel back then, around the turn of the century. The foot of Main Street, you know, these ships, they weren't really ships. And then this guy named Tom Ball had, and there's a town here named Tom Ball, named after him. He had this great idea. Let's steal all that shipping that's being done in Galveston. Let's bring it up here to Houston, because they had a big hurricane there, right? And suddenly things weren't working so well in Galveston. And he created what is today Houston, really, because he created the ship channel. Tenacity, it took him 30 years, a lot of work with the federal government to make that happen. But there's Houston way in the background, but the reason Houston is here and the reason it's that big is because of all this industry, all the shipping. And we export that stuff, right, through pipelines that go across the country, right? And so we're not just exporting oil, it's plastics, it's natural gas, but it's also technical know-how. And people come here, they migrate to Houston. I think right now it's about 300 people a day move to Houston. That's a big deal. We also did things like this. Every time I look at that, I see the word doomed instead of domed. And yes, those are Colt 45s, but 1962. And so we have this thing today, right, which nobody has the heart to tear down, but at the same time, nobody has the money to figure out what to do with, except the county judge has decided we're going to put the world's largest indoor park inside of the Astrodome, which is a crazy idea, and the Chronicle called me and it's like, hey, what do you think of that? And I was going to lampoon it, and I thought, you know what? This is an awesome idea. This is Houston. We should do this. And we reference things in Dubai, like, indoor skiing, so we can do this, absolutely. We should. So, Gillies Club, Houston culture. Houston culture, all right. Houston culture, it's messy, right? The Orange Show, we have automobiles that we decorate and drive around town. We also discovery things, though, right? We discover stuff. Fracking was invented by this guy in Houston. And, the money that comes from that is paid for a lot of these parks and open spaces that we're building today. Don't forget that. Houston, there's this big debate in the city council right now. What is Houston? Is it an oil town or a space town? I say no, it's a natural town, right? We have great bayous, we have great prairies, we have great open spaces, right? And we have a great culture, right? We're the most diverse county in the United States. Houston, let's not forget, invented Texas. right? Just a few miles from here, that Santa Ana there had just lost the battle. This is the thing I'm most excited though about right now. This is the map of Houston, probably in 1950. This is the map that my firm is interested in trying to help us create, which is this new map that's all about bayous and greenways and not about freeways anymore. Scott's going to talk about Buffalo Bayou, but it's important to remember it's a lot of different projects that have added up over time, from things that are happening way down at the mouth of the river to things that are happening up at Terry Hershey Park up towards the top of it. Back to infrastructure, we love all this stuff, right? And we're trying to figure out what to do with it. Bayous can become greenways, power lines can become greenways. We can do all sorts of interesting things with open spaces that we have that we come in contact with every day, but we don't think about that way. So this is a project that we thought about, this has been maybe 8 years ago, taking a power line in West Chase District and turning it into open space. This is a project up in Airline, just north of Houston, where we're taking a ditch, a good old Houston ditch, and turning it into a bikeway that people can actually use in new ways they never thought that they could do. Houston has issues, right? There are issues with health outcomes if you live on the east side or the west side of town. So if you live on the west side of town, you get this beautiful park. If you live on the east side of town right now, you get a lot of industry. That's changing. Projects like Bayou Greenways, the green grid that the Parks Bureau is working on, all those things are starting to create opportunities where the east side doesn't have to be just that. And I love this. Happy, Healthy Houston, 10 years ago, nobody would have ever put that on a magazine cover. But the project that Scott is just about to talk about changed the way people think about Houston because it changed the way Houstonians thought about themselves. We're very proud to be a part of that project. Scott, I think you're next.
So last year we finally opened up Buffalo Bayou Park. It was the culmination of 3-4 years of design and detailing and meetings, 35,000 emails and counting based on my last check. And it was really a great example of everything that's been discussed thus far with public-private partnerships. We had an amazing team, obviously the leadership of Guy Hagstead, Buffalo Bayou Partnership and Ann Olson, City of Houston, Joe Turner, Harris County Flood Control District, and many, many, many entities. Our design team with Doug Reed's group, Reed Hildebrand, assisting in the development of some of the landscape concepts and design detailing. Larry Speck, again, in terms of architecture. So this has been a project in the making, and really also goes back many, many years, decades even, in terms of the visioning of the community behind the project, ultimately bringing it to fruition. You know, we talked a lot about storms and stormwater. When we talk about Buffalo Bayou Park, just to put it in context, that dark blue area is Buffalo Bayou Park, which is in the centerpiece of Buffalo Bayou, which is a part of a major network of 6 major bayous and many others that course through east to west through the city and into the Ship Channel and into the Gulf of Mexico. The watershed area for Buffalo Bayou in particular is about 102 square miles. The region obviously much greater than that. Buffalo Bayou has always been a very turbulent landscape, very wild, but it was also a very beautiful landscape. You know, cypress trees in the eastern portions, magnolias, cottonwoods, all these landscapes, a character that has been lost over the years of all this urbanization and development throughout the city. It's obviously also the birthplace of Houston, as we've all been hearing about. This is Main Street as it dumps in, where industry sort of almost the most westerly point of navigation of Buffalo Bayou at that point. Our attitudes of the city have also been challenged, or the altitudes of Buffalo Bayou have also been challenged over the decades. Great Flood of 1935 really devastated downtown and greater Houston, and in general also changed attitudes about waterways and bayous throughout the city. Channelization of the bayous, this is Bray's Bayou, or White Oak Bayou. Concrete lining most of the major byways as they travel through the city really denuded people's relationship with the land and with the sort of most significant natural feature of the Houston landscape. Buffalo Bayou was spared the concrete, however it wasn't spared modification. In the 1950s it was channelized itself. It was scraped all the way from Shepherd Drive all the way into downtown to increase the flow of water, and in the process straightened out a lot of the sinuosity of the channel, and resulted in a landscape now that is very far from its original natural state, even though Houstonians, as they view it, see it as a natural location. It's also flanked by 2 major roadways, with Allen Parkway on the south and Memorial Drive to the north, which essentially locked in this stretch of land, and given Houston's weak examples of pedestrian infrastructure, really made very difficult to even get to this park. And again, continuing even today, Tropical Storm Alice in 2001, even with all these drainage improvements, the city is still faced with major flooding. So this is the challenge. We're trying to build a park within a piece of infrastructure which is in itself challenged by much greater regional watershed issues for the city. So there's our city, and there's our turbulent landscape of Buffalo Bayou Park, just to the west side. We had did some earlier projects, the Bayou City Promenade, and right to the heart of downtown, and then Buffalo Bayou Partnership is working on continued efforts to the east side. But this is very dynamic, turbulent bayou water system that courses through the heart of the historic heart and the cultural heart of the city. Over the years, before we started work, this was what Buffalo Bayou Park looked like, and essentially forgotten landscape with a few hardcore groups of users, of runners and joggers and nature lovers who still could see through this to the vitality of the ecology and just the lack of park space in Houston, using it out of necessity. So we engaged in this master plan and design process for this 2.5-mile stretch, almost nearly 4 miles if you include the earlier phases through downtown, planted 14,000 trees, 10 miles of trails, increased biodiversity by reducing mowed turf areas by over 50%, replacing those with meadows and trees and so forth. And it instituted a lot of gestures for connectivity to the adjacent neighborhoods, as well as developing a degree of park programming that would support a greater diverse user group for the park. And we can't forget the core of the city here. This is the 610 loop that surrounds the city. The core of the city, that's about 500,000 people that live within the core. And as we talk about bikeways being developed in Houston, those will all be within 30-minute bike ride of Buffalo Bayou Park, and obviously all the other great parks, Memorial Park, Herman Park. So the amount of users, as was illustrated in the last presentation, is extraordinary, and the demands on these parks are extraordinary. Early on, our first efforts in the Bayou City Promenade really addressed some of the most challenging portions of the project by building trails and adjusting grades and vegetation and dealing with the hydraulic issues to reconnect what's formerly known as Buffalo Bayou Park, sort of west of downtown, to downtown itself. We wanted to get people connected back up to the more sort of bucolic landscapes, or in the future become more bucolic landscapes. And in the process went through a whole series of design exercises that developed a vocabulary that's very specific to this environment, with these heavy guardrails and light fixtures that can withstand going underwater, and systems of planting that are robust enough to withstand the frequent inundation. Later projects, Rosemont Bridge. This was a project just west of downtown. And this connected not only people across the bayou, but it also connected people north to neighborhoods to the north, Old Sixth Ward, and there was some additional trails that went along with this that contributed to that. And that's really fundamental, because we were trying to reintroduce people to the bayou landscape. It's, again, people's perceptions of the bayou were concrete lined channels. If you did go out on a trail, you were in full sun. It wasn't a very pleasant experience in the middle of summer in Houston. And these projects really began the process of reintroducing people to the landscape and seeing the bayous from perspectives that they had not seen before. And before, if you went out to Buffalo Bayou, you had been driving by high speed, or you might have been, if you were brave enough, walk down into the trail system, push through the brush to see the water. A lot of the species of plants that were growing on the banks of the bayou were invasive. Now, some of these little bridge gestures offer views into and over the water. You can actually see the waters flowing down, and I think this is about the sort of cultural education and the ecological education of Houstonians, so that they understand not only the beauty of this park, but also the impacts of all the decisions, development decisions in the surrounding region as well. And these bridges also served another purpose of, there's a series of now 5 major bridges that basically subdivide the park into 4 segments. And essentially, before, if you went to the park, you were committed to a 2-hour, 3-hour walk in the heat of the summer. Most people did not have the time or brave enough to do that. And now these offer much shorter loops, which we think brings in the possibility for people with other lifestyles, who have kids, who have limited mobility, to be able to go in and see aspects of the park. We also structured the planting in ways to really bring forth sort of the unique characters of the ecology, using cypress and cottonwoods and sycamore trees that are more associated with the riparian corridor of the bayou, and bring them to the forefront and gateway elements into the park. Again, we've talked about the species diversity and the plantings that replaced a lot of the actual areas that were maintained by mowed turf in an effort to restore the ecology and really restore the character of the project. And Bring people in the course, again, these bridges, the ability to get up into the trees and see and touch foliage with their hands and see the waters from different perspectives. Increasing boat access into the park. There's actually now kayak rentals, where people will take short kayak trips rather than having to be a committed kayaker that's going to go out there for a major adventure. Introducing natural children's playgrounds to the park, these sort of gateways for the younger generation to this type of landscape. These are the future of Houston, and these are the people that are going to be policymakers. We want them to love and enjoy the bayou and make it a part of their real embedded experience and their identity with the city. Oop, dogs, can't forget dogs. We have a very luxurious dog park out there that's been loved to death. A lot of work protecting the existing habitat that's out there, the bats. If you go out to Lost Lake, you'll actually see the bats now like to feed above the pond there at night. It's kind of eerie and exciting at the same time. And this is Lost Lake, so bats circle above the pond there. But this is, points of refuge in the park. We actually have two major buildings, but this one in particular has we call Lost Lake. It's a protected water system and offers air conditioning in the heat of summer to actually enjoy the bayou as well. Safe promenading at night. Working with local artists to, again, celebrate gateways into the park. This is work by John Runnels, who's a longtime contributor to Buffalo Bayou. Even the lighting part of the park, we wanted the park to be safe at night so you can traverse the city. And that was also overlaid with an art piece by Stephen Corns and with assistance from l'Observatoire, lighting consultants, which developed the light system that included these little blue orbs and some underlighting of freeways that are synchronized with the phases of the moon. And this is about sort of revealing the natural cycles of the bayou, and actually even the tidal influences of moon phases on the bayou itself. We've uncovered, new secrets. There's a whole story here with the cistern on the northeastern corner of the park, which was slated for demolition, that was preserved by Buffalo Bayou and Partnership, and ultimately is going to be an amazing art facility for the future. We have beautiful art. We have art that instructs, in case you've forgotten how to enjoy nature. We have large concert venues. Again, we want this to be a cultural hub of the city, celebrate the diversity of the city. And ultimately, we think of this project as a great example, a great learning tool for our firm and hopefully for other firms as well, the role of landscape as infrastructure for the city. So as the city was once defined by its urban vehicular infrastructure, now we hope to be defined by its green infrastructure, and ultimately reawaken sort of the idea of the Bayou City for people who live with here now. So thank you.